Hello again, YouTube. I recently saw Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. So, considering that I made a video about Man of Steel, I figured I would give my thoughts on this movie. Now, I went into this movie with absolutely rock bottom expectations. As apparently nearly 10,000 people on YouTube already know, I did not like Man of Steel. And seeing the trailers for this movie, I felt like, all right, I know where this is going already. In fact, let me show you a clip from when I predicted almost a year ago in early May of 2015 what I thought this movie was going to be. All right, this is what I think the movie's going to be. So Superman's going to be this controversial figure. He's got all this power. Should we trust him? Should we not trust him? Who is this guy? Lex Luthor's probably, or almost certainly, behind the scenes making people fear and distrust Superman, running a PR campaign against him. And then comes in Bruce Wayne / Batman, and of course he's like, I'm the savior of Gotham, I'm defender of humanity, who's this? Batman's got control issues, so he wants to be the one to challenge Superman. Probably believes he's the only one who can. And so for part of the movie, Batman and Superman are going to be against each other, and this is probably going to be something that Lex Luthor helps to instigate. And then I'm guessing Wonder Woman's going to come along and be like, you guys are like boys with toys fighting each other. You need to team up and fight the other enemy. And then I go like, yeah, we should listen to her. Yeah, we should totally fight whatever the bad guy is in this movie. And then there's probably going to be the obligatory introduction of kryptonite, which is going to be used against Superman. And then Batman's going to be like, oh, I gotta save Superman. And, other people like Aquaman are going to be like, hey, I'm here making my obligatory cameo to set up my character for the next movie. And, it will end in the predictable way that most Hollywood action movies do of this sort. And yeah, that's my prediction for the overall plot. Now that prediction, as it turns out, was fairly accurate. I don't particularly like the direction they've gone in with Superman. I, however, was not one of those people who was like, oh my god, I can't believe they cast Ben Affleck. I didn't really care. That didn't bother me. But given my dislike of Man of Steel and how unenthusiastic I felt by the trailers, I battled whether or not I should even bother to see this movie. And then I saw early reviews of the movie that were somewhere between mixed and people saying they hated it and complaining about various things in the movie. So that just sank my expectations lower, and my expectations had just about flatlined, but I went to see the movie anyway. And I have to say that this movie exceeded my rock bottom expectations. It was not terrible, and I did not hate it. Now, can I say that, all right, it was a good movie? No, I'm not saying this is a good movie. I think that a lot of the reviews basically get it right about what's wrong with this movie. However, I disagree with a few points, or have my own thoughts about a few points, and I'll get to that. And just by the way, I should have said this at the beginning of the video. This video is going to contain spoilers, so if you don't like it, go away. Alright, now that we've gotten that out of the way, after I had heard various negative reviews, I honestly spent at least the first half of the movie thinking to myself, I don't really see what people's problem with this movie is. Of course, as the movie went on, especially into the final battle with Doomsday, I'm like, alright, this movie's got some problems, and those problems are compounding on themselves. Let me say for one thing that a lot of people said that the first half or the first, section of the movie is boring. Now, I actually commend the movie in the sense that it showed some restraint, and it tried to tell a story. Yes, that story was a bit of a clusterfuck with lots of different things trying to be crammed in there and having several different stories that it wasn't managed well. Nonetheless, it actually gets a bit tiresome when a movie goes, okay, every so now and then, like clockwork, we have to have a big action set piece in case those popcorn munching morons in the audience get bored. Like, okay, it's 45 minutes in the movie. We need a big action set piece to liven things up. I felt that was one of the problems with, say, for example, the Avengers 2, the super Iron Man versus the Hulk fight towards the middle of the movie. I thought that was relatively pointless. It seemed just crammed in there to keep it interesting. Nonetheless, I'm not really bothered by the movie being, quote, too boring. That's all a matter of taste. People also said it was too dark. Again, it's a matter of taste. I'm not really complaining about that too much personally. As far as the lack of humor in the film, they did try and have Alfred and Perry White get in some jokes, but really it's a movie with Batman, who's never really been one for cracking jokes. He's usually what they call the straight man. Even in, say, the Justice League cartoons and other versions of the character, he's not a big joke teller, joke cracker. Either is this version of Superman. Just given who the characters were, how much humor did you really expect in this movie? Wait till they have, say, The Flash and Green Lantern. If those characters aren't the ones cracking jokes and delivering the humor in future Justice League films, then they've really screwed up those characters. Those are going to be the ones that are going to be the more comedic characters in future films, but I don't really expect, humor from Batman or this dour version of Superman that they've created. People also complained about the beginning of the film and how they felt that it didn't gel together. It just didn't bother me, really. I got what was going on, even if when it jumped to completely different locations and completely different things happening. It didn't throw me. It felt like, okay, this is set up, and I didn't feel like, oh, this is taking forever to set up. That, again, I guess it's a matter of perception and a matter of taste, and a lot of people complained about that, and I just sort of shrug at that. Also, the setups for the Justice League. I don't think it was done very well, but I'm also not like, oh my god, this is so terrible. It's like, yeah, it's clunky, it's bad. It's clunky amongst other scenes, like the Bruce Wayne's dream sequence in the film, and the Justice League setup. Those are just a couple of examples where the plot really did become kind of discombobulated, and it's like, this is kind of throwing the story out of alignment and making it clunky. But, I mean, it was just sort of like, meh, that's not really a very clever or interesting way to do things. And it is lazy, as some people have pointed out, but it's also not like the worst thing ever either. Now, of course, the biggest complaint that I am inclined to agree with is the portrayal of Lex Luthor. And again, this is one of those strange things where I made the mistake of watching several reviews before I saw the movie. And the way that people were talking about this incarnation of Lex Luthor, I thought he was going to be much more out there and kooky than he actually was. So when I saw the movie, I thought, this is subdued compared to the way people were describing him. I have met kookier, more eccentric seeming people in real life than this version of Lex Luthor. I don't know what kind of circles you people run in, but I met some out there people, and it's like, this is kind of subdued compared to the way people were describing him. However, I think it's a terrible version. I would much rather have seen a calm, controlled, calculating Lex Luthor. When you stop and think about some of the things in the story, I'm glad that they attempted to write the story in a clever way where you can start to see how, when you look back, like, oh, I get it. These were the machinations of Lex Luthor. For example, towards the beginning, when Lois Lane goes to get an interview with the terrorist leader person, and there's the mercenary squad, and I'm thinking, who are these mercenary people? And she takes the bullet, and she has it analyzed, and it's not known. And then you find out, well, it's because they work for LexCorp. And it's like, I'm glad that they're trying to set this up, that you can see that Lex Luthor had this elaborate scheme where he's trying to set up Superman to discredit him and get him to fight Batman, and the pictures that arrive on Clark Kent's desk, the Polaroids, to make Batman look bad, are the same Polaroids he shows of like, look, I've kidnapped your mother, and you kind of get this, aha, Lex was behind it. But at the same time, it's actually really stupid to use these very specific bullets when you could just use like standard, what is it, 5.56 NATO bullets that the mercenary people at the beginning of the movie could have, they could have got their bullets anywhere. Why have something that could potentially be traced back to LexCorp? I mean, the reason that they had that little thing with the very specific kind of bullet was just so they could say, haha, it was me, even though that doesn't really make sense. Why the fuck would you do that? Why would you give them these, specific high-tech bullets or whatever, special metal bullets? It doesn't really make any sense. And that's amongst many things that don't make sense. But the main problem with Lex Luthor, aside from his crazy, kooky portrayal or whatever, was that his motivations didn't make sense. Their attempts to give him a motive and explain why he didn't like Superman, I could almost see what they were going for, but at the same time, I felt like it was some really weird version of that movie God Is Not Dead, where he's like the professor who's like, I'm angry at God, I hate God, because they're trying to go with the whole Jesus metaphor with Superman, and so he, like Lex Luthor has to be like the stereotypical angry atheist. That's all I could think of. Like this sort of atheist that only exists in the fevered imaginations of screenwriters of movies like God Is Not Dead. Like, he's angry at God, and so he's going to take it out on Superman. That's just not, no. Just no. They could have made Lex Luthor have more rational, sensible motivations, and it all just kind of comes out in this kooky jumble of nonsense. Also, creating Doomsday, as other people have pointed out, unless he was certain that he could control Doomsday, or really, what was his plan? I can kind of understand, okay, this, in case Batman doesn't kill Superman, his backup is Doomsday, but it seems like if you can't control this thing, it could just wipe everything out, including you. Why would you take that huge risk? What was the point of creating Doomsday? It was just like, huh? And not only did it not make sense, but in terms of the structure of the film, most of the film builds up to Batman fighting Superman, and they have their little fight, and then they're like, oh, and now Doomsday. They didn't really build up to that. It felt thrown in almost as an afterthought. Well, this short little fight between Batman and Superman, it's not climactic enough, so we gotta also toss in this thing, and then we can have Wonder Woman jump in the fight. And it was like, huh? And that, for me, is when the movie really started to fall apart. So the first, I don't know exactly, it felt like 2/3 of the movie, it seemed to mainly center around Batman, and I agree. I also liked this interpretation of Batman. That was the best part of the film. So the first 2/3 are pretty decent, and even the parts where it's, sort of Superman on public trial, although I have my problems with that, I was fine with it up until you start to get into the fight and the motivations start to fall apart. Like, I've kidnapped your mother, now go fight Batman. It's kind of like, And then why they stop fighting, like, Martha, must save Martha. Oh, God. That's when I was like, yeah, I'm not so sure. And then they just threw in Doomsday because, big boss battle at the end. And I was like, nope. You in no way earned this. And then Superman dies. It's like, nope, you still have not earned this. And we already know where this is going. It's just like, oh no, he's dead for 5 minutes. I wonder if he'll come back. We all know he's going to come back, and you might fool like a 10-year-old in the audience, but for the most part, no. So it's really like the last third of the film, the third act basically is where the movie just falls on its face. So if you like these characters, you might like this film, but if you don't like these characters, you're probably not missing much by just skipping it. Speaking of things that were obvious in the film, aside from the inevitable resurrection of Superman, was the Batman versus Superman fight itself, because it just utterly baffles me when people are like, well, how could Batman fight Superman? I mean, Batman's just a regular guy and Superman's got like this super strength. So in the movie, spoiler alert, Batman, of course, uses kryptonite. It's so obvious that why anyone would think that Batman would give Superman a fair fight. I mean, Batman is many things, but a fool he is not. Of course, Batman is not going to give Superman a fair fight. And not giving Superman a fair fight, he's going to seek out his one weakness and exploit it, and then use it to kick his ass. I mean, it was so fucking predictable. Like, duh! I still don't understand how people are just like, Batman wouldn't stand a chance. Like, oh, really? You've never heard of kryptonite, Superman's one weakness that renders him, weak and vulnerable. You've never heard of that, have you? I thought it was just like everyone learned things like that through cultural osmosis. Of course Batman is going to use kryptonite against Superman. Are you fucking kidding me? What did you expect, asshole? And also, Wonder Woman. Honestly, I felt that there wasn't a lot in this movie that made me go, oh, I definitely want to see more of this character. They didn't use her very much. They didn't set her up. They attempted to keep her mysterious, so they didn't set her up in a way that's like, wow, this is an awesome character. I can't wait to see her in her own movie. They didn't really show her fighting as much as I thought. I'll go see the Wonder Woman movie anyway, just because I'm curious about what they do with the character. But I don't really feel that this was like a great hook for that character, or for any of the Justice League characters. It was just like, okay. So I guess I don't hate this movie, but I don't like it either. It was like, it was a thing. I saw it. It was like lights shining in my face that told the story, sort of. See it or don't. What? But at least it wasn't Man of Steel. Seriously, fuck that movie. So that's basically what I thought of the movie. Kind of meh. But in the near future, I think I want to do more serious video talking about some of the things that this new incarnation of Superman brings up. Like their attempts to be deep and modern, which I think are just misguided in a lot of ways, and shallow and hypocritical in a lot of ways. But I'll explain that in more detail. But along those lines, I want to recommend a video that Steve Shives did recently talking about this trend of dark superheroes and the lack of optimism, and how that's really based on the erroneous idea that millennials are all cynical and all will only respond to dark movies. And he brought up a lot of good points in that video, so there's going to be a link to that. And have a good whatever time it is.